To my friend who requested that I watch and review this movie, I apologize in advance for everything I am about to say. I didn't give Wolfman the highest score, but with that exception, most of the movies I've been talking about lately have been pretty good. So I thought I'd change that by reviewing this 2004 PG-13 action horror movie, Van Helsing. Since Universal is doing a new string of monster movie remakes and might potentially even be eyeing the idea of another dark universe with Lee Winnell at the helm, I thought I'd just remind everyone of their recent attempts to do this kind of shared monster universe idea by reviewing this fiasco trilogy of Van Helsing, and then Dracula Untold and the 2017 Mummy, which those reviews will be coming soon. Now, the Van Helsing character was first adapted to the screen back in 1922 in the unofficial Dracula adaptation of Nosferatu, and since then he's been adapted in many different ways. He's kind of taken on a life of his own. And this movie presents him as a kind of Indiana Jones type going about hunting down monsters, although Hugh Jackman here, who plays Van Helsing, doesn't have anything close to the charisma or the charm that Harrison Ford did in the Indiana Jones role. Anyway, let's get into it. I'll start with the obvious, and pardon my French, but the CGI in this movie fucking sucks. And subpar CGI wouldn't be that big of a deal if the movie didn't rely so heavily on it. There are so many scenes of characters climbing up walls and jumping around the map, and every time it looks terrible. It is blatantly obvious that they are just moving in front of a green screen. But those aren't even the worst parts. There are entire scenes in this supposedly live-action movie that I don't think actually even exist. Scenes where it's literally just 3D models moving in front of a background that was fabricated in some sort of software program. It's maybe 1 degree above something like Space Jam. The CGI monster designs are arguably the worst thing of all. One of the most egregious examples is Dracula's brides, who are in so many scenes of this movie, and every time they show up, it's just laughably bad. There's also scenes where major characters transform into monsters in order to fight, because how could we be engaged with a conflict unless our characters look like video game avatars? And that is exactly what they look like. I could go on, but then we'd be here for an hour, so I will reluctantly move on to talking about the many other ways in which this movie is bad. For instance, Kate Beckinsale, who is unbelievably bad in this movie. Her performance is hilarious. She's constantly affecting this super low-effort accent that just makes me cringe every time I hear it, and it makes her line deliveries, which are already terrible, even worse. But to be fair, it would have been hard for any actor to make her character work because she's just so poorly written. She's just this very generic girl boss type of character who has to team up with Hugh Jackman to try to fight Dracula and whatnot. And then the way they wrap up her character in the end is just the final nail in the coffin of this character sucking ass. And the rest of the characters don't fare all that much better. The dialogue they're given is either way too serious and sincere, or it's humor intended for a 10-year-old. Either way, it's awful, and the performances from just about everyone else are pretty mediocre. I guess I'll just finish out this category by mentioning the action scenes, which are pathetic. Not only are they absurdly overblown, drawn out, and visualized almost entirely using crappy CGI, but the characters are so lame that I frankly could not care less what the outcome of the scene even is. In fact, I would rather Dracula just killed all these assholes and ended the torture of this excruciatingly boring movie. But alas, a movie like this would never have the balls to do something like that. As far as the mixed goes, I guess there are some elements that aren't entirely bad. I think in concept, the idea of bringing together all these classic monsters into a single movie could have been fun if it was presented with writing that was more self-aware and effects that weren't awful CGI. It could have maybe been like a camp classic, but alas, It also seems like this guy Richard Roxbury, who's the guy who plays Dracula in the movie, seems to have known the kind of movie he was in, and so instead of going for this painful sincerity, he kind of leans into the silliness of the dialogue a little bit, And so I think his performance is one of the few somewhat fun elements of the movie. But that's about it. When it comes to genuinely good elements, I really can't bring myself to mention anything. This movie is the kind of bad where every minute feels like 5. It's just painful to sit through, and that erases basically any goodwill that I really could have towards it. This is just a very bad movie, and there's not too much more than that to it. In my opinion, it's a solid 2 out of 10.